Generative Fill inside of Photoshop is really amazing. Essentially what it does is it removes objects, it adds objects, and it extends objects. In this tutorial, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to what it can do, and then throughout the rest of this course, we're going to look at how to get it to create exactly what we want, how to get around limitations and all kinds of other things. So the easiest way to describe it is to just demonstrate it and show it. So why don't we start with removing something from this photograph? We're going to grab the lasso tool and let's make a selection over the city here, which happens to be Honolulu. All right, so we've made a selection. Now we're going to see this generative fill option. If you don't see this bar, go under Window and go down to Contextual Taskbar, and that will load this bar up. Now you can put this bar wherever you want, and you can also hit this little menu here and you can pin the position, which is what I've done. And there's some other tools in here, and we'll look at some of these. We'll use some of them throughout this course. Now, what we do is we hit Generative Fill. This puts us into this window where we can put in text. Now, if we put text in here, we can tell it, hey, we want to add this, and we'll do that in a moment. If we don't do anything, you can see what it says here, describe what you'd like, or generate, or feel free to leave this blank. If we leave it blank, what it's going to do is it's going to just basically replace this based on the surrounding pixels. So it's going to say, hey, we want to get rid of the city and create something similar. So we're going to do that right now, and we're going to hit generate. Another thing to bear in mind right now at the time of this recording, it's only available in the Photoshop beta. I show you how to get that beta in another tutorial. In the future, this will be in the main Photoshop. So I'm not sure when you guys will be watching this particular lesson. All right, and after a little bit of time, it replaces it. And notice it creates a layer. Let's hide that layer. We can see there's the original. We turn it on. And then we'll see variations. There's 3 different variations in the Properties panel. So if you don't see this, it's under Window Properties. And that Properties panel will show this. So we can click through and we can see there's a second or a third option. So whenever you generate, it's going to create 3 different options. And in fact, let me just generate one more time just to show you. Notice this bar is going here. What's happening is it's uploading it to the cloud, and that way it can use the powerful computers in the server farm to be able to do all the computational work here, and then it will send it back to your computer. All right, and now we've created 3 more. And if we look at that option and that option, so we got a little bit of water going inland, they all look different. Let me tear out the Properties panel just to show you. Now, when you generate 3 more, the originals are still there. So at any time, you can go through and you can click any of those options. And of course, you can hit generate again if you want more. But if you know there's some in here you just really don't like or you're just not going to use, you can just hit that little X and that will remove them and just free up a little bit of memory on your system. Most of the time, you're not going to be having multiple stacks of variations, but sometimes you might. All right, let me just drag this back into here. All right, so the other thing we can do too is you'll notice we have the ability to click through the variations from this arrow here in this toolbar. And you'll see there, as I move it, it moves. It's exactly the same control. Another thing to bear in mind, when we create a layer, notice this icon on here. In fact, let's make this larger. We'll go under our panel options here. And we'll make these really big. There we go. And so that icon means that this is a generative layer. So if I create some kind of a prompt, which we'll do in a second, it will travel with that. In fact, why don't I show you that right now? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a selection, and let's just make a selection up here. And why don't we add something like, say, a bird. So I'm going to hit on Generative Fill, and I'm going to type in the word bird. Click Generate. You'll notice once again there's that status bar. Now later on in this training, I'm just going to kind of clip out those bits so you don't have to watch this status bar going the whole time. But in this particular tutorial, you can see how it's working there in real time. And there we go. We've got a bird generated. And it's pretty good. It's a seagull. There's I guess it's a goose or a duck or something. Maybe a goose. And there's another bird. So you can see that we can go through here and now we can add things. We can generate different objects. Let's go with this first one. And then if you look at this layer, when you click on it, you'll see the prompt will say bird. It will also say bird in the toolbar. So we have the ability to work from either of these. So if, say I wanted to duplicate this layer. If I duplicate this layer now, and I'm just going to drag this bird over to the other side. Notice it's not going to blend in, of course, because when it's created, it creates a little block around where the selection is. So it actually generates part of the background as well. It's not cut out like a 3D model, so to speak. But when I'm here, if I click on there, you'll see nothing. But as I click on those, you'll see the prompt is in there, bird. So if I wanted to fit this bird in, I could hit generate again. I could hit it from here, or I could hit it from up on the toolbar. So why don't we just hit it here? I'm going to hit generate. And now it's going to generate another bird. It's not going to be the same bird. That's the thing about these. These are actually created, so they're not clip art or pieces of photographs. So what's actually happening is this AI, which is what's behind it, and we'll talk about it more in later lessons, but this is actually trained from images. These images are in Adobe stock. We'll talk about all that later on once again. But what it does is it looks at all those millions of images, and it analyzes those images, and it starts to understand what a bird looks like. So it looks at millions of pictures of birds. And by the way, here's some other birds here, and that's why we get pelicans, all kinds of birds here. Right, so it looks at all those birds, and it understands what a bird looks like. So it doesn't go into Adobe Stock, find a picture of a bird in somebody's photo, cut it out, and then paste it in here. What happens is the machine learning actually generates a new image. So this is called generative. So it, out of knowing what a bird looks like, it creates a brand new bird that's never existed before. It'll match the angle, it'll match the lighting, it'll match the atmosphere, and you'll see as we go through this course, it's actually going to adapt to all those different things. Now notice the size of it is based on the size of that selection. If I wanted a smaller bird, I can just hit Control T or Command T, and let's make our selection smaller. So now we're still working on this selection here, but this selection is based on that layer, which is the generative layer. Obviously, it's not going to look good because that, remember, it's not floating. It's on that background. I mean, you could cut it out if you wanted, but we can just hit generate again. It still says bird. We hit generate. It's going to update this generation, and whatever it creates is going to blend in with that background because it's going to create a new background behind that selected area. So there we go. There's a different bird. And we could go through different types of birds and see, hey, how is that looking? Now, we can try to get a more accurate bird. So say, for example, let's type in, rather than bird, let's type in seagull. And now we're going to generate and see if it gets a seagull. Now, sometimes it gets it right and sometimes it doesn't. What is one of the things that's going to happen very quickly? This is going to get better. If you've used any other generative AI, there we go. It's a seagull for sure. If you've used any other generative AI, such as Midjourney or DALL-E or Stable Diffusion, you'll notice that they improve very quickly. So 6 months ago, Midjourney couldn't create faces very well. The eyes were all glassy and weird. It couldn't count fingers. And now it's much better because it's progressed that much faster. And this is the same thing that's going to happen here. Now, this is all based on Adobe Sensei, which is the AI that Adobe has actually been using for a long time. If you've looked at things like, the automatic selection tools that maybe you've been using for a while, such as Select Subject, or maybe the neural filters, or different things like that, some of the fill brush, the remove brush. There's all kinds of AI that Adobe's actually been working on for about 10 years now, and just slowly putting different parts in, even upscale. Like, there's a lot of parts in Photoshop that are already using it. And then so what they've done is they've leveraged that And now they've added the ability to generate images using the Firefly technology. So Firefly was released by Adobe as a standalone, kind of a playground online where people could get early access and start playing around with generating images. Now that technology is inside of Photoshop, and this is where we're generating. All right, so we've looked at two things that we can do. We can remove things, we can add things, and then the third thing we can do is we can extend things. And I'm just giving very basic examples right now, of course. So let's go into the crop tool, and why don't we extend this? Why don't we grab down here, and I'm just going to hit enter to apply. So we want to extend this image and create a foreground. This doesn't exist. And this also shows why it's AI, because there's no way it could take a piece of another photograph and paste it in and have it perfectly match this photograph. So it's going to generate it. So always want a little bit of an overlap, and it just gives it a little bit of buffer room to play with. And once again, we don't want to put anything in here. We're just going to hit Generative Fill with no instructions and just let it use surrounding pixels, the surrounding environment, and create something that matches. So we're going to let it do that. And just going to take a little moment here. Larger pieces seem to take a little bit longer sometimes. And look at that. See how that road, I mean, it's a road that goes to nowhere, but that road definitely lines up. And look at this. This lines up. And let's have a look at some other options. There we go. There's a different variation and a completely different variation there. So, it's not bad. It's not perfect, but you could select that part of the road if you wanted. Let me show you. So if we wanted to have a road, say, for example, we could drag that out there, make a selection, and now we can go in and give it instructions. So we can hit Generative Fill here, and we can type in road and hit generate. And of course, we have no idea what we're going to get. It could be good, it could be bad. And sometimes at this stage of development, the results are pretty random. Sometimes they're really good, and sometimes they're not. So there we go. We've got some kind of a road there. And as you can see, oh, okay, that's definitely a lot better. That's more believable. I mean, you could say tarmac road with yellow, medium strip, whatever. We'll worry about that later on when we want to get more specific on images. Right now, I just want to just kind of give you that introduction into here. All right, so another thing we could do is, why don't we just make a selection around here, and just to give you an idea of the capabilities, I'm going to hit Generative Fill here, and I'm going to type in lake. And we'll hit generate. Okay, that did not work very well at all. That sort of started to get it, and that failed. So what happens if you try to generate something like that and it doesn't work? So what do I do in a situation like that? It's actually really simple. I just dump it, and we'll just get rid of that whole layer. And I'm just going to start again with a new selection. Because one of the things that's interesting about here, and we'll get into that more into the lesson, is the selection is so important. The shape of that selection is just going to make a massive, massive difference into everything. So let's go here, and we're just going to choose lake again, and let it work with a different shape selection, and this should give us different results. Yep, now it's generating a lake perfectly. So look at that. 3 different lakes there. So there's a big tip for you guys that you probably saw there is, if it's not working, don't keep generating and generating and generating. Just dump it, create a new selection, and let it do its magic. In fact, the biggest secret that you're going to take away from this is the selection is absolutely everything. It really makes a bigger difference than almost anything else inside the application. All right, so I think this has given us a good little introduction into, what this does, what it can do. And what we're going to do now is we're going to jump into some very specific lessons, and then we're going to work through it. I'm going to give you some tips along the way, and then I'm also going to show you when it's a good time to mix this with the tools, because we've got a whole suite of tools inside of Photoshop. And sometimes generating is not the fastest or the best way to get that result. Sometimes you want to combine it with the other tools, like we will throughout the rest of this course.